After the others left, Freya's aquamarine eyes turned slightly colder. As though a semi-frozen lake, cracks of ice appeared ever so subtly. The temperature in the room dropped tout de suite. The three that perceived her mood kneeled down almost immediately. Head hung low, none of them dared to look at her in the eyes. "Brother Luca, Caiden, have us sit first." Her voice was gentle, but her expression was far from that. Luca and Caiden obeyed. The tension in the room made them keep their mouths shut. The Freya sitting on the bed was foreign to them. It's better to observe. Sure, they saw her malevolence when facing her enemies, but she wasn't emitting killing intent, nor was she facing her foe. She only sat there and gazed icily at the three. The aura of oppression swirled in the room like rising currents. In Luca's eyes, this scene resembled a few little mice facing a snarling snake. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes passed, 3 minutes passed, 2 minutes, 3 passed. 10 minutes passed, yet she showed no signs of speaking. Passed, yet she showed no signs of speaking. Cold sweat dripped down James' forehead. He felt numb all over. He teared up internally. His master was still so cruel. Freya finally opened her mouth after 20 minutes passed. "Raise your heads." The three gazed at their master. This appearance, they missed her very much. The feeling of nostalgia churned inside of them. Ecstasy and fear coexisted within them. She tilted her head, her voice, as sweet as nectar, dripped into their ears. "Why are all of you kneeling?" Silence penetrated the room. Was she the one who wanted them to kneel? Mason fell into deep thought. The moment the room went cold, she didn't say anything. "It seems like all of you have a guilty conscience." She tapped her cheeks with her index finger, resting her chin on her knuckles. None of them refuted. She hit the nail on the head. Her lips curved slightly into something like a smile. The look in her eyes remained enigmatic. Black Diamond's reputation seemed to have dimmed quite a lot. Hasn't. I have not once heard of the organization's name ever since I was reborn. Master, that don't interrupt me when I'm speaking. She tapped her index finger on her lips. Her tone was soft. James pursed his lips into a thin line. Palms were sweeting. Words and wheezers. Her eyes darkened. The previous Demon King of the South, wasn't he problematic? Yet none of you removed him. The Demon's authority can't affect any of you. None of you were residents of the South. We have no excuse. James, as the leader, lowered his head. It was true that they didn't do their job properly. After Freya's passing, everyone was in no state to work. They did the minimum, controlling the demon realm in the shadows. They did a lot, but also neglected a lot. And without Freya, the backbone, Black Diamond almost split up. James was barely able to keep the organization going since it was the will of his master. Reflect on your mistakes. Mason, you read the vice leader. You have to help him properly too. Vivian, as a major sin. Slacking off is not an option. That's all I want to say. We can't change the past. She crawled over and patted their heads. The frost in her eyes thawed. Though there were many mistakes, thank you for the hard work. This organization of hers, she didn't think it would still be standing if she was being honest. It surprised her that it hasn't collapsed. The three felt their hearts turning into mush. They really missed her dearly. With the warmth of her palm, they were certain she was back. Freya sat back comfortably and threw out a sentence. "James, you will continue being the leader of Black Diamond from now on. I want to be taking it back." "What?" he exclaimed. "But master, just now you said a month." She promptly interjected with me current state. "I can no longer bear the weight of an organization." "Master, that doesn't matter." Mason held her hands. Caiden didn't make a sound, but seeing this scene, he felt uncomfortable. He narrowed his eyes and averted his gaze. Freya didn't notice his displeasure. Her eyes were focused on Mason. She asked, "When you see a flower in full bloom, what do you do?" Confusion flashed through Mason's "Nothing." Freya nodded, "For rather than seeing it wilt. I would pick it when it's at its prettiest state and preserve it. Do you understand?" Mason loosened his grasp. He bit his inner cheeks silently. "Understood." "Good. Don, to let the others know of my return for now. I'll return as the founder once EV sorted everything out." Now that was settled, Freya beckoned the two sitting young men over. She had her disciples stop kneeling, letting them stand comfortably. "All of you cast a sound barrier. The more the better. The things I'm going to say can't be overheard." Of course they obeyed. They obey. "I need you guys to swear a blood oath. Those who think it's too much can leave." Her eyes swept across them sharply. None of them moved. Freya smiled contently. Taking out a white rose from the vase beside her, she slit her wrist with her fangs and let the crimson drip upon the rose, staining the pure white flower with her blood. She licked up her wound and passed the flower to the next person. When the rose returned to her, it had turned entirely scarlet. Freya infused it with demonic mana, making it glow brightly before shattering into red shards, entering their hearts. Usually, for a blood oath, a small sword would be hanging around their hearts, but Freya made some adjustments. It will only make them unable to talk about anything relevant to the topic. "Have I ever told you how the demon realm works?" She glanced at her three disciples, who shook their heads. "I guess I didn't have enough time. I'm sure all of you know. The demon realm is always expanding when there are new demons. Thanks to this, it's also known as the Infinity Realm. It's also due to this fact that a lot of mana is needed to keep it going. That's why we demons have a few % of mana extracted from us every day. However, newborns typically have little mana, close to none. It's hard to maintain stability. Yet the rule prohibited the demon realm's core to extract more mana from stronger demons. This continued for millennia as the gap slowly widened. Soon after, the demonic mana needed wasn't enough. So, the demon realm's survival instincts got triggered after realizing it might not be able to preserve through. It started to find a vessel, and that's how it found me. Cough, cough, cough. Freya coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Their eyes widened as Freya's pale complexion turned for the worst. They all rushed forward only to be stopped by her. "I am fine." Freya smiled only to feel an electrifying pain coursing through her veins the next second. She cursed. Cold sweat coated her forehead. She felt giddy. Caiden turned to his fox form and snuggled into her embrace, transferring over some mana, hoping that it would help. Fortunately, it did. Freya chuckled dryly. "Like this. It found me again. Anyways, the vessel has to make up the lacking mana." Freya felt uneasy, but a lazy smile remained on her face. This time, her mana wasn't as abundant as before. Being the vessel will take a toll on her. Bit by bit, the demon realm will eat her away. That's also why I was compensated with the power to control all of the demon kings. Meaning, she was the true ruler of the demon realm. No one can refute her at all. She could make the demon kings kill those who were in her way. Albeit, she did no such thing, as she was powerful enough to take care of herself in her previous life. Putting that aside, Caiden and Brother Luca will be joining Black Diamond. As for the positions, Caiden will be taking greed, and Luca will be taking pride. It's been vacant for too long. Just like that, their master replaced her previous lover. Mason was a good friend of the former greed, so he could help his heart turning sore. Should he quit and let his lord take his place? Master. I know what I'm doing. Freya had the final say in everything. He swallowed back his words. He trusted his master unconditionally. Her gaze shifted to the two new members. Of course, if you two don't want to, you can reject me. I'll listen to ye. Luca patted her head. Luca patted her head. So should I call you master now? Freya got goosebumps and whined. Brother Luca, don't tease me. Luca chuckled in response. Freya gave out her instructions promptly. Mason, explain how the organization works to Caiden and James. You do the same to Brother Luca. If you two have any questions, just ask them. Caiden in his fox form nodded and nuzzled against her. She wrapped her arms around the fox and continued, Vivian, take Austin as your disciple. Mason will take Alistair. Teach them well. Those two are gems. Understood. Vivian chimed while Mason nodded. They captured Ruby and Ezra's whereabouts. Have it ready by tomorrow. She jerked her chin at James. Brother Luca, help him out. I will. James nodded enthusiastically. His master was playing Cupid for him. He was grateful. Freya's glittering eyes, however, stared unmoving at the twitching fox ear in front of her, not paying attention to her disciple. She licked her lips and chomped on in. Her actions shocked everyone in the room, especially Caiden. All his fur and tail stood up. He, like a robot, tilted his head to face her. Freya, eyes curved, holding his ear between her lips. She released the poor fox only after seeing his ears have turned pink. She pecked his nose, restraining the urge to bite it. Caiden once again froze. He felt heat surge up his face. Why was she being so aggressive after regaining her memories? It somehow felt like she was venting her anger. Satisfied after bullying the Arctic fox, Freya announced lazily, I need to talk to Vivian alone. The homework I left before I died, I'll check it the day after tomorrow. Caiden stumbled out. His legs felt a little weak. The others quietly went out without a word. They felt embarrassed, but seeing the cruelest demon king being tormented, a sense of schadenfreude rose within their hearts. Freya reached for the fruit basket and tossed a grape into her mouth. Chewing it slowly, the thread is still connected right. Vivian made a sound of acknowledgement. Freya rose from the bed, her expression unfathomable. She fiddled with her earrings. That's good. Freya's not done. Arche gazed at the group that arrived. Caiden shook his head in reply. He had already turned back to his humanoid form. The blush on his face had already faded, but if one observed him carefully, they would see the faintest pink that tinted his ear. James and Luca stood at the corner of the room, None of them had the desire to eat. I'm sure you know the purpose of our organization. Luca nodded expressionlessly. Without Freya present, he changed into another person entirely. James was used to this version of Luca, so he didn't mind. The normal members are called sins. On the other hand, we are called major sins, who each represent one of the 7 deadly sins. Pride was the master's title in her previous life. Luca remained silent, seemingly in deep thought. James thought he did not understand and explained, to put it simply, the major sins are the master's disciple, while the sins are the disciples of major sins. Freya was the one who chose you guys. All of you are very strong and should be older than her, yet you guys willingly followed her. Sure, his little sister is very lovable. He would die for her if she wanted him to. But that can't be the same for strangers. Master's power in this life is restricted, and she does seem milder. You won't ask this question if you knew how she used to be like. James's face showed a complicated expression. It won't to be exaggerating to say she used to be the strongest demon in the demon realm. He almost got killed by her with a flick on his forehead. Mason joined in. Where's your lord? James frowned, showing blatant displeasure. He wanted to be alone with Luca. A slip of the tongue. He's probably sulking. He asked me who the former greed was to master. I didn't want my head flying off, so I answered honestly. His lord was sharp, and with the blood oath he had sworn. His lord will know. He was lying the moment he opened his mouth. Who was he to her? Luca asked, curious. Lover. James's lips twitched. The only one who Master considered her equal. He followed Master ever since she was a child, if I'm not wrong, probably the earliest out of all of us. Mason nodded his head. You were correct, I was the second. He was the first. I was Master's secretary while he was her personal knight. Isn't this bad? Luca's brows knitted. He knew the temper of Caiden. He had seen him torture suitors who came after Freya during banquets. He tore the men into shreds without batting an eyelash. Blood splattered all over the walls of the room. Those men even begged for death at the end. His indifference and ruthless methods of torture made even Luca, who was quite cruel himself, have goosebumps. Caiden stood at the center of the room, as though snowy white rose amidst the corpses. Not a speck of blood reached him. That image had burned into Luca's mind. He wondered if this man was too dangerous for his adorable little sister. Yeah, I didn't know what he was doing behind her back. The twins were lucky that she held them of importance, or else Caiden would be. Luca shuddered at the thought. The main point was Caiden gets jealous easily. No, possessive should be more fitting. Possessive should be more. My lord and the former greed is quite similar at one point. Their feelings for Master had surpassed love. It's more of an obsession. Mason rubbed the back of his neck. The 3 went silent. I'll inform Master when she arrives. Mason sighed and excused himself to take some food. Anyway, back to the topic. I'll give you an example. James hooked his arms around Luca. Lust, the one with Master right now, used to have an interesting hobby. Long, long ago. The zoos. Master, are you sure? This route, I heard them talking about a face-peeling demon. James' hand tightened on the 10-year-old. Isn't that more interesting? Freya indifferently pulled him forward. I'm sure you can protect me. Master, spare Maeve, greed and envy knew. Before he could finish, a woman with orange hair appeared before them. Freya gazed at her lazily and mumbled something inaudible. Oh ho, what a pretty little lady we have here. I'm not pretty. I am beautiful. Freya's lips curved nonchalantly. So you re that demon who peels off faces on a whim and kill the owner afterward. If I am, so what? So I am. Vivian scoffed. She sighed in regret. Thanks to you, the pretty ladies on this street are decreasing. You should worry about yourself first. I'll make you me new collection. Vivian rushed forward, swinging her whip fiercely. Freya remained unfazed. She turned to James, stand back. Freya avoided the whip gracefully, looking like she was dancing. Relaxed and elegant, her body moved nimbly, approaching Vivian in a blink of an eye. Her index finger tapped on her forehead, making Vivian fly back and crash into the wall. The loud bang resounded in the narrow alleyway. Freya sauntered to the newly made dent with her arms behind her eyes curved, so ugly. Vivian's face twisted in anger. This was her favorite skin. She wanted to move, but her limbs were limp. The child bent down and caressed her face. What air you arg? Freya mercilessly tore the skin off her face. Blood spurted everywhere. James behind her felt his scalp growing numb, but his master only gazed at the red muscle tissues with innocent eyes. James scratched his arm that had goosebumps all over. This felt like a scene from a horror movie. As Adaman, her skin regenerated after a few minutes. Freya scrutinized the new face. Her smile like spring zephyr moved their hearts.
Freya gently tilted Vivian's chin, drawing dangerously close. Isn't this much better? You're beautiful just the way you are. With a poof, Vivian's face turned red. It was only later that she found out Freya was only 10 years old. If I didn't know better, I would have mistaken Master for a seductress. James sighed. Well, every villain has their own sad story. Vivian wasn't an exception. Master helped her get revenge. Luca gazed at him. What about you? Freya must have been younger when she met you. Yep, she was only 8. I was about the same as Vivian, though I like ... human hunting. I've already quit though. Go do what you need, I'll bear the responsibility. She was so cool when she said that. Luca rubbed his chin. His Yaya was usually very cute when she was with him. She liked acting like a spoilt puppy. It turns out she had a cool side. The series, Prism of Four Winters, was also written by her. That ancient magic series that many coveted? I heard one's mana awareness will greatly improve after learning the techniques in there. Yep, she wrote that when she was 12, James said proudly. Oh right, I'll give you a scroll later. Luca raised his brow. What scroll? It's something all major sins have. It's a special scroll created by Master. Give it some blood and the scroll will give you instructions on how to cultivate a unique ability. I can create gates to the human realm and heavenly realm. Albeit, there's a cooldown period. Vivian can see the red thread of fate, Ruby can make one remember their previous life, etc. There are a few rules. 1. You can't teach your ability to another person. 2. One person can only have one scroll. 3. No outsiders are allowed to have their hands on the scroll, though it's not like they can use it since Master never acknowledged them. This is also the homework she mentioned earlier. There are many stages of cultivation for one ability after all. Then what about Yaya? She can use all. She created them after all. James had the word obviously plastered on his face. But I guess she can't use them now. Luca mused, none of you found it weird. Weird. Don't you think she's too strong for a child? A child, James murmured, his eyes widened. I had never seen Master as a child. It seemed normal no matter how great she was. I wouldn't have noticed if you didn't say anything. This dash. Luca was startled when a pair of arms circled his waist behind him. Cold, why were they so cold? Ah, you found out Freya's giggle made them jolt. I used puppetry on you, can't believe it didn't fade. Puppetry was a strong ability, from controlling movement to thoughts. Strong puppet masters like Freya could control people without strings, and the victim won't even notice they became puppets. Ah, so that's why realization struck James. It's a shame I can't use it anymore. I loved that ability. Freya sulked. Why are you so cold? When did you come in? Luca asked as swept her off the ground and Princess carried her. My temperature dropped after reconnecting with the demon realm's core, she answered obediently. I came in not long ago. I was talking to Daddy just now. Freya nuzzled her head against his cheeks. I came here to say bye-bye. Freya's gaze fell onto Mason behind her. Luca and James understood at once. He already told her. She let out a chuckle and intentionally dragged out her tone. I have to go coax my sweetheart. AGE13, or age 15. Freya pecked Luca's cheek as he let her down gently. She cast a glance at James with a triumphant smirk. She ambled over and whispered into his ears, when are you going to make your move? This master had helped you out so much. Do I'll have to wait another century to see my niece or nephew? The corner of James's lips twitched imperceptibly. His eyes landed on Freya, who was clearly amused. Freya's eyes curved, smiling innocently. She mouthed, coward. James's hands clenched into a fist as his body trembled. He repetitively chanted in his mind, it's fine, she's just a child. Calm down. Endure. As the older one I have to endure. Yaya, do you have to whisper around in front of me? Luca's brows knitted as he complained, another secret. Freya raised her brows ever so subtly. She did promise Luca that there will be no secrets between them when she was younger. But with the memories of her first life, there were many things that she had to take to the grave. Of course not. Well, it's not my secret. Asked James if he would tell you. Her playfulness made James anxious. His palms wouldn't stop sweating. Looking at James's red tomato face, she pitied her disciple scantly, deciding to be benevolent this once. Then I'll get going now. Mason held out his hand as she put hers on his palm. In a blink of an eye, they arrived outside of Caiden's castle. Good job. The reason why Luca and James didn't ask for the reason why she never seemed like a child was thanks to Mason. He was the disciple who inherited the ability of puppetry. One of the requirements was that the puppeteer had to be stronger than the puppet to work. Freya gave him a smile of approval. It seems like you have surpassed James. Keep up the good work. Mason dropped down on one knee. Yes, master. Say, aren't you curious? Freya blinked at him. Whatever master wants to keep hidden, this disciple will help. He pecked the back of her hand. She chided softly, you should let yourself go once in a while. Isn't it tired to keep everything inside? Mason remained silent as he looked at her. Even without saying anything, Freya knew what his gaze conveyed. Do you have the right to critique me? Fair enough. Freya waved him goodbye and headed into Caiden's castle. She waltzed in like she owned the place. Well, with how frequent she came here, this place was her second home. She sucked on the lollipop she took on the way and headed towards his room. Only her footsteps echoed in the vacant hallway. She didn't even bother knocking. There were multiple layers of barriers surrounding the castle. Caiden should have already known of her arrival. Caiden, she peeked through the door. But before she could open it any wider, a hand stopped her. Can you come back after a week? Caiden's voice was unusually hoarse. Did he cry? Freya glanced at the milky white hand with beautiful distinct joints. The green veins protruding on the back of his hands were prominently pulsing. Why was he using so much strength? No, Freya rejected firmly. Sounding displeased, "You're not going to ask me to give you some space because of that, are you?" Caiden's eyes landed on her when he heard a loud crunch. Freya's looked at him straight in the eyes, crushing the lollipop between her teeth. His ears twitched in trepidation. He felt like it was his head that she was chewing on. Helplessness was evident in his tone, just ... not now. Was Freya going to listen to him? Of course not. She inserted her foot into the small gap and cried out, "It hurts my foot." Caiden jolted and subconsciously released his hold. He knew Freya was acting, but he couldn't risk it. Those few seconds were enough for her to wiggle her way in. His brows furrowed, taking advantage of his love for her ... How unfair. The scent of icy mint wafted towards her as she inclined her head. Caiden had already disappeared from where he once stood, leaving not a shadow behind. She scanned the room and saw the profile of the man sitting on the bed behind the folding shoji screen. Freya let out a laugh, throwing the stick into the dustbin. "So you were in heat. You weren't sulking. Your pheromone is very refreshing. ... It'll be weirder if you didn't have a lover." Caiden smiled painfully. "And I don't have the right to be jealous. We never made anything official, although I will definitely make you mine." Freya's eyes widened. She went unconscious before she could make him her lover. She sighed. "Is that how you've been thinking?" Caiden was shocked to hear her voice right beside him. Being in heat, his senses were dulled. He quickly pulled a blanket to hide his throbbing thing. Freya didn't care that much. She pushed him down onto the bed and kissed him on the lips. "We'll make it official. You can mark me." She's going to be the death of him. Caiden never expected her double attack. His flushed face turned even redder. He could only cover half of his face using his hand. His first kiss was stolen, just like that. That wasn't the point. Just how much trust did she put in him to attack him like that in his heat? She had no idea what's been running in his mind this entire time ... or else she wouldn't even dare step into the room. He wanted to make her his, make her cry underneath him ... He clenched his jaws, making sure the beast in him won't break free. Endure it, she's still too young. "Are you sure? I won't let you go ... No matter how much you hate me." After that, his eyes darkened as his free hand kneaded her nape. "I'll force you to stay by my side forever." "Are you sure?" She emphasized her words. "You won't be able to love anyone else. The partner will be bounded to the fox for life. In return, the fox will never love another being until she is freed by death. I never planned to love anyone else." He took her hand and kissed her wrist. Freya had to admit her dear lover was ... very hot. Her eyes glowed, involuntarily scanning Caiden from top to bottom. What will happen if she strip him down and cuff him to the bed? A rare blush appeared on her face as she dismissed the dirty thoughts popping up one after another. Caiden was the one in heat, yet she had lusted over him. Was this what they call sexual frustration? In truth, she was already 46 years old mentally. She died every time without reaching adulthood. For demons who are inherently libidinous, it was exasperating beyond means. "That's good. I'm selfish. Even if I die, I want you to love only me and belong to me," she cooed as she stroked his ear. Getting up, she brushed her hair away and revealed her slender, pale nape. Something inside him snapped. Caiden's eyes turned gray, flipping her over. His hands covered hers, which was a shade paler, while he hovered above her. He licked the spot tenderly as Freya shuddered under him. "So tasty ... So sweet. Relax." "Oh." He gnawed on the spot before biting down, marking the love of his life. Her sweet blood entangled with his saliva as he gulped. Freya shivered from the electrifying pleasure. Her body went weak, slumping on the bed with no strength to resist. Her submission and docility made Caiden's mind go blank. He licked up the bite mark, savoring every second of it. The bite mark morphed into a silhouette of a sitting fox with a butterfly landing on its nose. Is it done?" she asked in a weak voice. The corner of her eyes was tinged with red. The sight made Caiden's heart flutter. Yes, he scooped her into his lap, burying his face into her chest. After marking, the partner can help a nine-tail in heat feel more comfortable just with their presence. Freya caressed his hair softly. Why is there something hard on your lap? She gazed down, making Caiden's eyes turn obsidian black. FAK, he forgot. He wanted to separate from her, but Freya held him in place. I'm just kidding. It's normal when you're in heat. But this size ... she won't die ... right? In 2 years, I'll be able to help you ... hopefully. Endure it for now, she kissed his forehead. Her physical age was only 14, but she already had the body of an adult. Demons do grow quicker than humans after all. And thanks to this fact, many will do it even when they have yet come to age. But Freya had principles that she insisted on. I'll wait, Caiden snuggled against her. I'll wait for another decade or century if you want to. I won't do anything that will harm you. Humans might find fault with their age gap, but one's age in the demon realm wasn't a big deal. Since everyone will live for an eternity, it's normal to lose count as life goes on. Freya gazed at him dotingly. There's no need to be so ... Well, that's one of the reasons why I love you. Caiden whispered, I love you too, and buried his face into the crook of her neck. Freya languidly took some mandarins from the basket on the bedstand, peeling it attentively. She held one piece between her lips and lowered her head, nudging the other end at his lips. Caiden carefully took the piece of fruit into his mouth. But who knew Freya would take this chance to kiss him? Seeing the mirth in Freya's eyes, he knew he had been teased again. Stop testing me. He buried himself into her again and bit her collarbone, trying to make her restrain herself. Freya's lips curved. If only others knew how cute their lord is ... Nah, on second thought ... She was the only one allowed to see him like this. Her clear aquamarine eyes glanced at him when she felt him shuffle. What is it? What was greed like? Oh, he's jealous. Freya held back her laughter and described he had hair as black as the night and violet eyes like you, though a little more droopy. He is a nine-tailed fox as well, extremely gentle and loyal to me. Caiden bit his lips. He can hear the love in Freya's tone. She's still not over him. He suddenly found it weird. Why did no one mention Greed's name? Freya's eyes widened slightly before going back to normal. Isham, the only one who knows of his name is me. Isn't that quite romantic? Caiden felt bitter, but he didn't show it. He tilted his head. So you can't tell me. I can, if you answer my question. Freya smiled. Who gave you your name? ... I gave it to myself. He just felt like this name was very important, although he didn't know why. Freya chuckled delightfully. Sweetness pranced in her heart. So you still remember? What? She looked at him silently. His captivating violet eyes were laced with confusion. Thanks to his heat, his usually short snowy white hair was now long, fluttering every now and then. The more she looked, the more pleased she was at her lover's flawless features. Caiden Edgar Zane, that's the name I gave him. A surge of giddiness hit Caiden like a truck. He rubbed his throbbing temples, resisting the urge to close his eyes. Freya sensed his discomfort. Unexpectedly, her words triggered him. She kissed his forehead and pressed it towards her shoulder. Don't resist it. I'm here. His teary eyes gazed at her briefly before nodding his head. His whole body slumped towards her and relaxed. Caiden felt more comfortable after closing his eyes. It didn't hurt anymore. Freya felt distressed over her lover's condition, but she couldn't help feeling elated. This way she didn't need Ruby's help at all. He could regain his memories and she won't need to waste her time visiting her second youngest disciple. Hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. Freya summoned her crystal butterflies after settling Caiden onto the bed in a more comfortable position. The purple butterflies flapped their wings around him, stabilizing his condition. The young man had his brows furrowed, but it didn't affect his peerless countenance. His eyelashes trembled ever so slightly. This pitiful appearance made her heart ache. Sensing it wasn't life-threatening, Freya sighed in relief. It should be different from what I went through. Still, she kept her butterflies around. It will still ease his pain, albeit she'll be the one feeling it instead. She rang the bell beside the bed. Yes, my Lord Mason's voice transmitted through the doors. Freya combed her bangs back with her fingers. Cold sweat formed on her forehead from the pain. It's me. Mason raised his brow. Master. Help me inform Dad that I won't be back tonight. If his condition worsens, it might take a few days. I can't leave. She carefully brushed away the strands of hair obstructing Caiden's face. What happened to? He's recovering his memories. You don't need to guess anything. He is the reincarnation of greed. Silence. Freya continued, I'm sure you've had a hunch. You served him for a reason. He can't hide anything from her. Go, convey my message, and command my team, Soul Reapers, to come stand guard around the castle. I need to focus. Mason sighed, yes, Master. Freya grasped Caiden's hand in hers, squeezing it gently. I'll assure your safety with my life. Those under her protection, she won't allow them to suffer any grievance. Caiden opened his eyes slowly, but what he saw had him startled. He was no longer in his room. His gaze drifted to his paws. Why did he have paws? Fox paws. He was in his fox form. Then why did he have black fur? Despite being in a foreign place, he didn't feel nervous. Instead, a sense of nostalgia stirred his heart. Although he had no idea why a dark alley covered with blood splashes made his heart feel fuzzy and warm. His eyes scanned through the alley. Corpses laid tidily against the wall, there was only a standing silhouette. The child's aquamarine eyes were the only source of light in this narrow path. He was entranced by the child's icy gaze, unable to look away. Until a streak of crimson caught his eyes. He stared at the stream of blood heading his way. He wanted to move away, but his feet were rooted to the ground. He couldn't control the body. Had probably returned to the past. He recalled Freya's words. There was a huge possibility that he was her ex-lover's reincarnation. He's recovering his lost memories. Having everything figured out, the fear in Caiden's heart dissipated. He was quite curious. Anticipation filled his eyes. He was going to witness how Freya grew up in her first life. But when were they going to meet? He fell into a reverie. Before the blood could reach him, he felt himself being picked up. His fur puffed up as his head turned to the girl warily. Pale aquamarine eyes that were as clear as a running river. This was undoubtedly Freya in front of him. He almost didn't recognize her. Her disheveled pink hair was coated with dust and filth. It looked closer to gray. She was wearing blood-stained baggy clothes that didn't fit her. Yet her temperament was domineering. The aura she gave off wasn't the same as the Freya he knew. Caiden scrutinized her from top to bottom. She looked no older than 4 years old. And judging by the fact he couldn't transform into his humanoid form yet, he should be about the same age as her. Just a baby fox. Her sweet voice was as cold as ice. Still, her gesture of gently patting him betrayed her facade. Little thing, it's quite dangerous here. You'll die if you're careless. She's still so kind. Caiden whimpered and rubbed his face against her palm. Freya's eyes held no light. She didn't look like she was living. Who knew what she had been through? Her eyes drooped a little. Do you not have a home too? Caiden blinked his big round eyes. The next second, a self-mocking smile dawned on her lips. What am I doing talking to a fox? Caiden's heart squeezed. He never knew there was a time Freya was a kid living in the slums. Freya saw the fox nuzzling against her. Something flashed across her eyes. Do you understand me? The black fox nodded. Are you a demonic fox? She was informed that demonic animals were intelligent. He nodded once again. He saw the girl hesitating before squeezing out, do you want to stay with me? Caiden snuggled against her and licked her cheeks. Freya was stunned, almost dropping the baby fox. This kind of Freya is kind of cute, he thought. You'll have to suffer with me a few days. My powers I'm not good at controlling them yet. Freya picked a spot without blood and sat down on the ground. Do you need to eat? I have no food, she frowned. What do you eat? She didn't really care about herself, but now that she decided to take this thing under her wings she had to take responsibility. He could see her thoughts through her eyes. Caiden felt distressed for his lover. Demons do feel hunger, though they won't die from hunger. Can you wait for a few days? She patted the fox that nodded its head in reply. She sat the little animal on her lap and closed her eyes. Caiden looked at her curiously. She was meditating. Meditating is a good way to increase one's control over their ability, but it wasn't commonly used. Maybe because the owner of this body was a child, he climbed up to Freya's shoulder. Be good, she grabbed the baby fox and placed it back on her lap. This time, the black fox obediently laid on her lap, resting its head on its arms, looking adorable. Freya stroked it before closing her eyes again. The next few days went by quickly. Freya finally opened her eyes. She touched the fox on her lap. It was emitting warmth. It didn't die. A soft smile made its way to her lips. Let's go. She let it burrow into her clothes. The fox would occasionally poke its head out curiously, glancing around, though it always ended up being pushed back by Freya's index finger again and again. Be a good boy. You're a male, right? Yeah, a male, she mumbled and continued coaxing. Be good, don't get noticed. They stopped in front of an inn. It wasn't too shabby, wasn't too glorious, it looked normal and decent. When the demon at the front desk saw Freya walking in, his eyes swept over her with contempt. This little kid looked like a stray. There's no way she could pay the fee. Caiden read that demon's gaze right away. He let out a hostile growl in his heart. FAK, if he finds him still alive in the demon realm when he gets back. He'll gouge his eyes out and make minced meat out of him. I want a room. Prepare a bath. Bring some food up. Freya's unperturbed manner made the demon's lips twitch. Money. I don't have any, she confessed lazily. Her eyes narrowed with a languid smile on her face. But you will do as I say. What? Freya waved her hand. The demon slumped down like a zombie before standing up straight once more. As if possessed, the demon handed her a bunch of keys. I will have someone serve the food and heat up a bath immediately. Your room is the third room on the right on the second floor. Freya grabbed the keys, unfazed. She sauntered to the room she was assigned to. Caiden felt his heart tremble. The moment the demon's eyes met hers, his eyes became dead. Like a puppet. She was 4 years old. Isn't this too powerful? He remembered Mason mentioning Freya's puppetry was top-notch, but to be able to use it at this age. Once the tub of hot water arrived, Freya washed the little fox with it, then herself after. Scrubbed clean, Freya's cuteness could not be concealed. And with the clean set of clothes, she no longer looked so unkempt. Originally, her plan was to stick on the streets for a few more days, surveying the demon realm, but her gaze landed on the baby fox. Freya put the food in front of the black fox. Eat what you can. Caiden tilted his head. She's not going to eat. Wake me up when you're hungry. I'll have them bring food again. I'm going to meditate. Before she could get up, the fox bit her sleeve and tugged. It nudged her softly several times, pushing the plate in front of her. Freya felt her heart tingle. It's been a few days since she was born. But she had never met a decent soul in the demon realm. Her eyes softened subtly. It's fine, you eat. The fox whined and started munching on the food. But he never forgets to shove some at her from time to time, stubbornly waiting for her to eat. Freya sighed. She really didn't need food, but to cajole the little fox, she ate some reluctantly. Having finished the meal, the fox nuzzled into her embrace and went to sleep. Freya sat cross-legged on the floor, looking at the tiny creature. Her fingers circled his defenseless neck. Young animals trust too quickly. She could snap him into two anytime she wanted to. Nevertheless, this thing still acted so brazenly. She chuckled silently, combing through his soft and delicate obsidian fur. She let out a low murmur. This is addicting. Her eyes curved before closing. Having a tiny companion. Wasn't so bad. Vibrant flowers bloomed, lush green leaves swayed. Autumn zephyr left the streets with warm colors, while fluffy snow dyed the realm pure white. Happy New Year! Freya stroked the obsidian fox in her arms. he let out a squeal and nuzzled against her in response. In the past year they went from inn to inn, staying at one for several weeks before moving to another. Time didn't pass differently for Caiden. He experienced every second, every minute with her. Though it might take a long time recovering his memories, for him it's a blessing in disguise. Albeit, he was a little worried that there was no time difference between here and the real world. Even taking his eyes off her for a second makes him anxious. ... It's almost time, Freya murmured to herself, her eyes darkened in the charcoal night. Caiden had no way of asking her what she meant, but he understood the very next day. A man in a black cloak appeared in their room. The hood cast a shadow over his eyes. Only the man's chiseled jawline and handsome features can be hazily made out. Caiden didn't blink as he gazed at the intruder warily. Logically he knew who the man was, but the past him was only a little fox. Freya patted the tense fox lovingly. Don't worry. ... So, you're my daughter, Arche's indifferent tone rang in the room. Freya didn't even glance at the man, she spitted the sentence out with the same tone. ... So, you're my father. What's with this cocky kid? Freya furrowed her brows with displeasure. I am not cocky. ... You can read my mind. Not only that, I can do many other things you can't. She tilted her head, her eyes filled with arrogance and indolence. Voice dripping with sarcasm. And you're supposed to be a demon king. Arche's hands subconsciously clenched into fists, veins protruded his forehead. He had never met such an irritating child, and this child was his. How exciting. He only came to know of her existence this morning. This was his kin. He didn't want to be irresponsible. He was down with a fever on his third heat and lost his control, shooting the wrong thing. Now this child in front of him, the living proof of his mistake. Holding back his temper, Arche pursed his lips. ... Well, aren't you a cheeky brat? Can I say the same? 23-year-old bastard, her eyes curved kittenishly. Endure it. Dure it. Freya glanced at the man, her lips curved as she raised her hands in surrender. Okay, I apologize. I shouldn't have treated an elder that way. But it was your fault for stepping on my tail. She wasn't sincere at all. Arche said through gritted teeth, it's fine. I should apologize. For squabbling with a 5-year-old, her brows raised, eyes filled with mirth. Seeing Arche silent, she cooed, okay, don't get angry. I won't mess around again. Freya didn't want her father to faint or vomit blood out of anger. Caiden had his eyes on Freya the entire time. He could tell her impression of the man changing throughout the conversation. From pure mocking to enjoyment. This was a large shift. In this short time, she had thoroughly observed and tested the man before her before deciding her attitude. Dad is amazing. It's an impressive feat to become a demon king before reaching 30. Even those who had already reached their hundreds find this hard to achieve. A soft smile appeared on her cute features, finally fitting the image of a child. Arche was stunned. This child changed her attitude faster than someone flipping pages of a book. He understood by the child's gaze it seems like he was accepted. The child who stared at him like he was a speck of dust had become a docile kitten. And here she was baring her fangs at him not long ago. His daughter was quite adorable. Thank you, Arche let out a slight smile. He finally pulled down his hood, revealing his flawless countenance. His long amethyst hair, which was slightly ruffled up, framed his face perfectly. His phoenix eyes were the same color as hers, pale aquamarine. Caiden blinked slightly, so at this time Arche had long hair. That's surprising. Dad is handsome. Freya's eyes sparkled. No wonder I'm so beautiful. What a roundabout way to praise herself. Arche chuckled. His child is very interesting. Let's go, my little princess. He carried Freya off the ground swiftly and teleported. Once they reached the palace, Arche asked, how did you figure out my age? Thinking back carefully, it was weird. He didn't reveal anything. Freya answered without batting an eyelash, I searched through your memory. Do you think I'm creepy? Freya chuckled. Well, I can be creepier. Caiden suddenly perceived Arche's improvement over the years. The Arche he knew was practically immune to Freya's teasing. No, He still gets affected, but at least he knew when to stop her. He wondered how this newbie Arche would survive. She shrugged. I won't do it in the future. I needed to see what type of person you are. Arche stared at his daughter, who stared back with innocent puppy eyes. He felt his headache. He had a feeling this child would change his life. Though he didn't know it was for the better or worst. This is your palace. Call the maids if you have anything you want. Arche pointed at another palace not far away. My palace is over there. We'll have lunch together tomorrow. Okay. Arche reached out his hand, hesitating, should he? But they had only just met. A small hand grabbed his, making him jolt slightly. Freya led his hand to her head. It's fine. The corner of his lips ticked up. He tousled her hair before leaving. There were no parents who hated their child except those who have some issue. After the maids bathed and dressed her, Freya explored the palace with Caiden in her arms. They stopped at the bamboo garden to rest. The ambience here was splendid. There was a small waterfall and several ponds. The bamboos were vividly green. It was a scenery that could only be seen in paintings. Freya sat down on a bench beside the stone trail, putting Caiden on her lap. Out of the blue, she reminisced, it's already been a year since I met you.
She was getting sentimental. Caiden peeked at her.
Freya bent her body and kissed the little black fox. Should I get you castrated? The fox let out a scream and jumped out of her embrace. Freya's brows furrowed as she extended her arm towards him. Don't be like that, it's healthier. Healthier, my ass. He shrunk back and avoided Freya's touch, letting out a cute growl to express his indignation. PFT, ha 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 ha. Freya held her stomach as she laughed, wiping away her tears. Caiden bit her finger in anger, though it was more of a playful nibble. He couldn't bear to hurt her. She cajoled gently, okay, I won't do anything to you. Come back, Em. Forgive me, I was wrong. The next second, she was pushed down. The boy above her pinned her wrists beside her head. So you knew you were wrong. A pleasant voice drifted into her ears, tickling them briefly. Freya's eyes widened. This was faster than she expected. This child was very talented. The 10-year-old had crow-black hair paired with violet eyes that were sparkling like gems. There was no doubt he would be handsome when he grows up. He was already stunning now. Oh dear, you transformed. Freya freed her hand and patted Caiden's head. You knew. Freya blinked at him, of course. Albeit it was a recent discovery, I only found out a few weeks ago. And you said you wanted to. Caiden's face turned pale thinking back to what she said. She giggled, hee. Don't worry, I was joking. You. Caiden rested his forehead on her shoulder, feeling wronged. He nuzzled his face into the crook of her neck and inhaled the scent he favored most. She froze for a second, her long eyelashes quivered subtly before letting out a sigh. This child had no idea how intimate his actions were. She knew he was doing this out of habit after being a fox for a long time. That's one of the reasons why she didn't push him away. It seems like further education was needed. Freya ran her fingers through his soft and fluffy hair. Good job. Now turn back. We'll be training your transformation today. Caiden pulled back, face filled with disbelief. I just turned into my humanoid form. Freya mercilessly explained, oh, you'll be turning back into a fox then humanoid form after. We're going to repeat this until you master it. It was a pitch-black night, no stars, no moons. The black fox stared at his beloved with tender eyes. Caiden yawned and finally decided to go to sleep. He was already 15 at this time while Freya was 10. He watched her getting closer to Arche, finally learning how to act spoiled. He watched her chubby cheeks slowly fade away. It was a warming experience. Oh, they also met Mason, though he was her tutor at the moment. Ever since he was able to turn into his humanoid form, Freya started giving him hellish training regimens. It was tiring, but her warm smile washed every inch of fatigue away. To protect her, he will even go to the depths of hell without hesitation. Just as his consciousness drifted away, a sudden thump from beside him made him jump on all fours. His pupils dilated. Freya, who was sleeping peacefully a minute ago, was sweating all over. Her whole body was shivering, even her pupils were shaking. She was panting heavily, gasping for air desperately. Her voice was hoarse, "Why?" He turned into his humanoid form and brought her into his embrace. His fluffy tails wrapped around her as if a barricade while he coaxed gently. "Shaich? It's all right." Caiden rubbed her back in circular motions, hoping to soothe her. After turning 6, Freya frequently had illness flaring up out of the blue, nightmares that caused panic attacks, and such. That's the main reason why he slept together with her. "Should I call your dad?" Caiden's brows furrowed with worry. "No." Scarlet liquid poured out her pale lips. "Don't be scared. I won't erg. ... How can someone be so good?" Even when she's hurt, she was still worried about him. His heart melted into a puddle. "Don't talk. Save your breath." He used magic to remove the bloodstains. Freya obediently kept quiet and started regulating her breath with her eyes closed. That thing actually assigned a task to her when she was already so busy, she couldn't help but spit out a string of profanities in her heart. Freya nuzzled closer into Caiden's embrace, so calming. She peeked at the red string connecting their pinkies that only she could see. An elusive smile made its way up her lips. It took an hour for her body to calm down. Her eyes fluttered as she yawned. Goodnight. Her arms folded naturally like a small animal. Snuggling closer to the source of warmth, she closed her eyes. A gentle kiss landed on her forehead. The person hugging pinched her earlobe between his thumb and index finger, kneading it tenderly. Sweet dreams. After that night, Caiden watched Freya establish Black Diamond step by step, watched as she expanded her businesses into various fields. He felt distressed with how much she was doing, day after day without rest. Green bags formed under her eyes. It was especially evident due to her pale skin. A year had passed, but Freya was still a workaholic. ... Why are you working so hard? He buried his head into the crook of her neck. A soft smile appeared on Freya's face. She skimmed through the document in her hand as she rubbed his head. "What's wrong with my little fox?" ... I am older than you." Caiden's lips twitched. Freya chuckled and let out a hum. He continued, "I just feel ... distressed. It's fine to take a break." "I can't." Freya's firm rejection made him knit his brows together. Before he could voice out his displeasure, she continued, "A year. Give me 1 more year and I'll pick up a more leisure pace, okay?" Hesitation was evident in his eyes, but in the end, grudgingly agreed, ... Okay. "Sweetie, well, aren't you getting busier and busier and busier these days?" Arche's eyes flicked up upon sensing her arrival. "I heard you went to town yesterday." Caiden's gaze lingered on Freya. She did keep her promise. Her schedule was definitely more relaxed, but ... it was still considered packed. The 15-year-old nodded and sat down with the black fox in her arms. "I'm thinking of expanding the business in the red light district." Truth to be told, Arche found Freya a little abnormal, but he never questioned her decision. Her results were solid facts exhibited right in front of his eyes. His eyes narrowed, expanding in that business? "Might I remind you, you are still a child." Her gaze lifted before stuffing another muffin into her mouth. She licked the crumbs on her thumb. "I know." "No, you don't." Underaged Arche elegantly set down his cup and enunciated. Freya cocked her brow. "I'll be 16 in 2 days." Before Arche could refute, she opened her mouth. "I'm thinking of letting Vivian manage the brothel soon. She can be a part-time hostess while she's at it." Facing Arche's skeptical stare, she continued while stroking Caiden's soft fur. "She volunteered for the latter part. She finds sleeping around pleasureful. The cash is a bonus." Arche rubbed his temples, eyes narrowing, letting out a long sigh. "Can you behave?" Caiden nodded along with Arche, her lap, which Freya responded by holding his head still. "Am I not behaving properly?" She tilted her head like an innocent puppy. "I have many businesses throughout the demon realm and I am also the demon king. Thus, I'm quite affluent." Arche sipped his coffee. "Even if you spend lavishly, my asset can last us for eternity. You should enjoy your teenage days." Freya's eyelashes quivered subtly. Her gaze directed itself onto the cup of tea in front of her. She wasn't doing this for money. ... I need information." "It's not for money, it's for information." She nibbled on her inner cheeks. I can give that to you. Silence permeated the garden, only leaving the birds singing on the branches. Usually she was quite fond of their chirps. But now she had the urge to rip their tongues out. Freya raised her head, eyes distant but at the same time, gentleness and helplessness grazed through. Daddy, there are lines that even you can't cross. Arche hummed and inclined his head for another sip of coffee. Freya knew that her words made him upset. She placed Caiden on her chair and skipped over, taking the coffee from her father's hands. She took a sip before her features scrunched together. Woo, how can you drink such a thing? So bitter. When she drinks coffee, it's usually added with a lot of cream and sugar. That's why you should drink your tea. Arche patted her head. All right, I'm not upset. Just a little bit sad that you can't trust me. Freya froze. The words that were about to roll out her tongue were swallowed back. Her brows knitted together and said softly, I didn't tell you not because I don't want to, but I can't. And ignorance is bliss. Knowing what I know. Isn't something good. I won't put any of you in danger. I understand. Arche let out a sigh. Stood up and hugged his daughter. If it gets too hard, share the burden with us. Freya didn't answer him, only nuzzling deeper into his embrace, which Arche took as acquiescence. Caiden had some training to do, so he parted ways with her after breakfast. He was a bit worried. Ever since a few days ago, trepidation had clouded his heart. The way he held his katana revealed that fact. Every strike was rough, losing its usual gracefulness and leisure. At the end of it, he was covered in sweat. His black hair stuck to his forehead, making him uncomfortable, so he casually combed it back. His lean muscles under the tight-fitting training clothes moved along with his actions, highlighting his beautifully proportioned body. He fell into a reverie, recalling Freya's action these past few days. It wasn't until he heard the sound of leaves shuffling that came from the trail that he snapped out of it. His katana swiftly made its way to the intruder's neck, only stopping by a few millimeters away. Greed. Wow, James jumped back in surprise. The brunette screeched, Are you trying to kill me? Oh, Caiden sheathed his sword, glancing away uninterested. James was speechless. He grumbled internally, This kid has no manners. Master wanted me to give out her instructions. He directly got into the topic. Caiden finally showed some interest. Freya. James nodded. She wanted all of us to go into closed-door meditation. For what? I don't know. She said it was a command. Caiden endured the uneasiness in his heart and nodded. He licked his dry lips. It was better to ask her in person. With that, he headed to her office, but her person wasn't there. The room, the library. His eyes flickered with panic. He headed to the lavender garden. It was there that he saw her figure standing at an inconspicuous corner. Caiden saw strands of rose-pink hair fluttering along with the wind. His eyes became gentle fray. His hands were stuck in mid-air. His steps came to a halt, eyes widening little by little. The girl was casually leaning against the wall. A cigarette was held between her fingers. Smoke swirled and danced around her, making it a breathtaking sight. But what caught Caiden's attention wasn't this. His eyes drooped, focusing on the water droplets landing on the grass. Tears were running down her delicate face as she let out a sigh of smoke. Her ears twitched, most likely due to noticing his presence. Her marble-like eyes slowly glanced over, widening subtly. Her eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. Caiden. There were only 3 demons who could enter the lavender garden unauthorized. It was Freya herself, her father, and finally Caiden, her lover. She threw the cigarette down and quickly wiped away her tears. Oh dear, why are you here? She spitted out a string of profanities in her heart. Why won't the tears stop? Her wrist was grasped gently as her eyes flicked up. The man was already in front of her. Honey, it's not good to rub your eyes like that. He leaned down, their faces inching closer to one another. Caiden kissed her tears away softly, his other hand looped around her waist. Freya's face reddened, but she let him do as he pleased. What's wrong? He pressed their foreheads together. Can you tell me? Please. Her eyes widened, hesitating before turning away. I can't. The words this morning weren't meant for only Arche, it was also meant for Caiden. He knew of this, but how could he do nothing when his lover is showing such a pitiful side? Freya has never cried before, at least, not in front of him. But he knew for sure that she won't shed tears for trivial matters. He had always respected her privacy, not asking more when she shows signs of being cornered or troubled. But this time, even if she finds him nosy he won't back away. His fox ears drooped. You really can't. Freya's gaze landed on the folded ears. She felt like something was scratching her heart. She guiltily averted her gaze. Don't use this trick on me. Caiden leaned down and planted a kiss on her forehead, still not telling me. Freya stayed silent. He looked at her for a few seconds before leaning down again. From her forehead to her eyelids, her cheeks, her nose, her lips, he planted butterfly kisses on her beautiful features. Freya's rosy lips twitched. You're getting more and more shameless. I miss the old you who gets shy with one touch. I learned from the best, he chuckled. His gaze turned serious the next second. I have a hunch. Are you going to sacrifice yourself? Freya froze before returning to normal. But it was too late. Caiden was observing every slightest movement of hers. Naturally, this did not escape his eyes. The kisses weren't to coax the answer out of her. It was to make her let her guard down and attack when the time was right. Even with Freya's incredible acting skills, she won't have enough time to react. The grip on her wrist and the arm around her waist tightened. Caiden's expression went cold. She clicked her tongue. Sly fox. You can't. His tone made no room for arguments, but Freya could make out his uneasiness. Freya glanced at him, opening her mouth but not saying anything. More accurately, she didn't know what to say. Caiden rested his head on her shoulder. Don't leave me alone. I can't do that. Freya kissed the top of his head. The demon realm will be destroyed. Caiden lifted his head. Then we can just go to another realm. Just bring those dear to you. We can. No, I can't. I told you before, I'm not like you guys. I'll cease to exist if the demon realm faces destruction. Tears seeped out of his amethyst eyes. His heart tightened. She had explained it to him before, but how can he accept it? I'll beg you, I'll get down on my knees. Just don't go. Don't leave me alone. His voice raised without him noticing. Please don't abandon me. He's been abandoned by his family. He didn't want to be abandoned again. He didn't want to lose the person who saved him, his salvation, his light, his dear Freya. He looked miserable. The desperation in his eyes was so evident that Freya's heart started to ache. She didn't want to cause him pain. This wasn't her intention. She couldn't bear to look at him in this state any longer. Freya hooked her arms around his neck, sealing his lips with hers. Caiden was stunned only for a second before taking control of the kiss. Freya let out a moan. The kiss was rough and passionate, like he was venting out his heartache and helplessness. He bit her lips to convey his frustration. Freya remained submissive throughout the kiss, just parting her lips slightly for the other to rummage her mouth. They parted after who knows how long, both panting and gasping for air. I love you. Freya ruffled his hair and gazed at him dotingly. As if afraid that he didn't believe her, she repeated the 3 words again and again. I love you very much. You don't know how much I love you.
Caiden sighed and buried his face into the crook of her neck. His eyes darkened. Then don't leave me. Stay with me for eternity.
I'm sorry. In the next second, their surroundings changed. They were in the small villa that Arche gave her for her 10th birthday. It may not be luxurious, but it was warm and cozy. It was on top of a hill and one could see the vast blood ocean. Why are we here? Caiden glanced around warily. Freya didn't reply to his question. I hope you can live well even after I'm gone.
Caiden let out a scoff. So you're going to lock me in here?
He knew he will never be able to surpass her in this life. She was way stronger than him. Thus, he didn't even struggle. The barrier will go down after I. A hand blocked her lips before she could keep going. Freya bit her lips after facing those eyes filled with bitter pain. When Caiden let out a self-mocking smile. Why was he so useless? If only the one. Halt your thoughts, Freya flicked his forehead and answered his question. My birthday ... in 2 days ... no, I have one more day. I'll stay here with you for the night. Caiden didn't want to sleep. He held the person dearly in his arms. He wanted to burn this image in his mind, his Freya. I love you too, he whispered to the sleeping girl. There was a nasal tone in his hoarse voice as he blinked away the tears. He fell asleep unknowingly. He knew it was Freya who cast a spell on him. When he woke up, she was gone. Tears fell out of his eyes. He curled up on the bed. There was nothing he could do. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. At midnight, the barrier broke. His mind went blank. Caiden screamed, but his voice didn't come out, thrashing wildly, not knowing how to vent. He went insane after meeting Freya's cold body. He tried to live, he tried his best. On Freya's 5th death anniversary, he couldn't take it anymore. The man sat beside his beloved's coffin, eyes empty. His fingers sharpened at his will, slowly approaching his heart. See you soon. He ripped it out. Caiden woke up, panting. His body, which was covered in cold sweat, shuddered. Tears welled up in his eyes. He pulled the pink-haired girl into his embrace. Freya, my Freya ... don't do that to me again. She knew the trauma he had to face when recovering his memories. Just a few hours before he woke up, her heart hurt so much that she wanted to dig it out. It was obvious what happened. If she knew her death would cause his so much pain, so much more than she imagined, it would have been better if they went together. Freya wrapped her arms around him, coaxing him for the entire night. How many days did I sleep? 3 days. Freya kissed his forehead. Caiden let out a hum and snuggled against her neck, making her giggle. Her eyes softened as she rubbed his hair. You've worked hard. Welcome back. Caiden nodded his head. His eyes darkened before landing on the girl. So are you ... an independent living being now? The room was engulfed with silence as the pitter-patter of the scarlet rain became more evident. The pungent smell made Freya's brows scrunch up. It started raining. She cupped his face softly. Don't avoid the question. His eyes narrowed. Freya's brows raised. I'm not. Caiden turned his head and chomped on her palm, expressing his current mood. Freya jolted out of surprise, gazing disbelievingly at the man who had his half-lidded eyes staring at her with indolence. Why did you even bother to tell them when you're just going to lie about your identity? Caiden nuzzled against her palm, even making us swear a blood oath. I didn't. I am the medium where the core gets mana from. I just didn't reveal the whole truth. It's not lying. It's not ideal to put them in danger. Caiden hummed and tilted his head. Can you answer my previous question now? She let out a helpless sigh. I don't know. It reconnected with me not long ago. I'm not sure to what extent it could influence me this time. Caiden's heart shook as his eyes started tearing up. The light in the room enhanced his watery amethyst eyes. It was hard to ignore. Freya felt her heart melting into a mush. Her gaze softened immediately. I have angel blood in me. I doubt it can control me completely. Look on the brighter side, will you? Freya licked away his tears away. Tasty. Your tears taste unexpectedly delicious. EP5. Her lips were suddenly subdued by her lover. She had no time to catch her breath. His wet tongue explored her mouth akin to searching for treasure in a deep cave. Freya felt dizzy from the heat, clutching his clothes tightly to keep her consciousness. Her aquamarine eyes, which were fogged with a layer of mist, closed as she melted into the passionate kiss. Caiden pulled away after a few minutes, resisting the temptation to go for another round of tongue tug of war. Freya was still in a daze. Those eyes tinged with redness and swollen lips were full of enticement, extremely alluring. Caiden's jaw clenched. He was no monk. Having his lover looking at him so teasingly, green veins protruded his forehead as he held back. Freya was still silently recovering from this smooch. Caiden thought as his thumb grazed her lips, these were the only times when she would behave. He leaned in and licked her lips once more. He would never let her go again. Such a sweet baby, he wanted to lock her up and made sure she belonged to only him. but Dai could never bear to make her unhappy. Maybe. Some other time in the future. Her hazy eyes slowly regained their original skittishness. Oh, you stopped crying. Hold back a little, won't you? You're taking advantage of a weak 14-year-old. Caiden's gaze flicked towards her, who was the one who made him snap. But she had some point. TSK, this is why I like your innocence before you regained your memories. You blush so easily. Now, you're like a brute MMP. Caiden felt that his reflection was futile. It was better to seal this disobedient mouth of hers. The vibrant and luscious roses swayed in the background as the handsome man sat there straight and poised. He skimmed through several graphs, grasping the situation of his companies. A slight rustle made him tense up. Before he could look back, someone looped their arms around his neck. Daddy, I'm back. He froze briefly before a gentle smile made its way to his lips. Arche brought her into his embrace, patting her head gently. Ian, welcome back, my little princess. His eyes landed on the man with snow-white hair behind her, noticing a slightly different temperament. There was just something that wasn't there before, a very subtle shift. Caiden knew what he was thinking and explained, I recovered my memories. Arche nodded. Ah, I see. That's good. Right, Freya smiled brightly. Now I don't need to go to the heavenly realm to face those toilet bowls. Toilet bowls. Because they're full of shit, Freya replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Arche paused before sighing. Language, sweetie. She stuck her tongue out playfully. Another rustle attracted the gaze of the three. Seeing who it was, they all relaxed. Master, I didn't want to eavesdrop, but does that mean you won't be visiting Ezra and Ruby Mason? Asked with knitted brows. Freya wore a confused expression. Them. Do they even remember me? One was 8 and one was 6 when I died. It's been a century. This was the other reason why she didn't particularly want to meet with her 2 youngest disciples. She wasn't close with them. She was busy at that time, so she didn't have time to take care of those 2. In the first place, she took them in on a whim. Though they were her direct disciples in name, James was the one who took care of them. They cried quite horrendously at your funeral. Caiden picked her up swiftly and sat her on his lap. They were wailing so loudly that it made him, who was sobbing quietly at that time, doubt his love. Did they? I think the times I met with them could be counted with my fingers. Freya cocked her brow. How heartless. That doesn't matter. In a sense, you were their savior. Mason felt helpless as he explained to his clueless master. Her eyes widened with mockery. I deliberately threw a gold coin at them, stared at them as they got beaten by a bunch of old geezers to a half-death state, finally bringing them back because they piqued my interest. Savior, huh? Interesting.
Mason couldn't refute. Giving food was fine, and clothes were good too, but giving money to children in the slums was like giving them a death sentence.
But he was there that day. He saw the look in Freya's eyes. They were cold, but from time to time pity would flicker by. There was another emotion, self-loathing. Mason watched Freya rush in when that pair of siblings started emitting killing intent. She was waiting for them to fight back. She wanted to test them. She had to choose demons who can endure hardship, those who can see hope in pure despair. He knew she did that for a reason. Freya enjoyed seeing obnoxious people suffering, but she didn't like seeing the innocent being trampled on. They might not understand when they were young, but they should have understood now. They're still your disciples, Arche reminded. What could she say against her father? In the end, her behavior still changes into a small compliant puppy when facing Arche. She leaned against Caiden comfortably. I will visit them, but not yet. Many recognize my face there. In the past, she did whatever she liked, traveling through the 3 realms like she owned the place. She was strong, so no one dared to protest, but now, it was hard to say. She had many foes who wanted her head. Putting that aside. She puffed out her cheeks. Daddy, how did you know it was me? Of course, there's the fact that she looked like the exact copy of her past self, but it might only be a coincidence. I marked your soul, Arche explained nonchalantly. Freya remained silent before licking her dry lips, blurting out subconsciously, I had a soul? I never knew that. Except for Caiden, whose expression remained unchanged, the other two looked at her like she was crazy. Freya bit her lower lips. Whelp, her mouth was faster than her mind. She wasn't going to explain, even with the piercing gazes directed at her. She was about to say something when a familiar voice called out to them. Brother Luca, her eyes brightened as she pounced on him, her savior.
Did you miss me that much? Luca twirled her around before kissing her forehead.
Freya nuzzled into his embrace. She rested her chin on his shoulder, looking at the group of people behind him. Andrew whined with his outstretched arms. Freya, didn't you miss Uncle? Freya hummed and pretended to think before saying curtly, no. They all burst out laughing. Everyone was here. Her dad, her lover, brother, uncles and auntie, the twins, her disciples. Her eyes curved into two beautiful crescents. If only days like these would never end. But she knew very well that it wouldn't last. Some people were part of the story, but not the ending. If only she was stronger. If only she could protect all of them. Tears trickled down her cheeks, shocking everyone. Oh dear, why are you crying? Luca rubbed her head as she buried her face into his chest. I'm just happy, Freya sniffled. She wasn't lying, she was happy that everyone was still well and alive, but also scared that she'll end up all alone again. After all, she realized in her mind resided another set of memories. The girl summoned her crystal butterflies, making the scenery even more pleasant. No one could tell her uneasiness. They sat together for tea. Freya smiled at the twins. I won't eat you. Why are you guys so fidgety now that you know my identity? Austin and Elistar both flushed red, making everyone cordial. They couldn't help it. Their new masters told them stories about Freya when she was the leader of Black Diamond. Freya spun the spoon in her hand before stuffing another bite of pudding into her mouth. Her unfocused eyes trembled subtly. Fate. Could she win fate this time? Freya. As the petals of cherry blossom fluttered above the crystal clear water, the girl turned her head. Her cotton candy-like hair swayed along with spring zephyr, her eyes as clear as the lake curved. A year had passed.